Hello, Angela Coté. We are back on the Field Coach Experts podcast. And today we're going to be talking about when field coaches seem to get burnt out, they seem to be working too hard, something's not quite right. And we're going to dig into early signs to know this is happening and then what we can do about it. But before we get right into things, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor of this episode, Rocket Barn. Rocket Barn is a franchise-first digital marketing agency built specifically for franchise systems. What makes them different is their franchise marketing advisor model, which is dedicated experts who act as strategic partners to the franchisees, helping them win locally while staying aligned with the brand. It's hands-on guidance, real data, and marketing that actually drives results. So big thank you to Rocket Barn. All right, so let's get into our topic for today, and we'll get into talking about field coaches getting burnt out. And that when we say field coaches, we're referring to FBCs, area managers, anybody that supports franchisees, whether on Zoom or actually out in the field. So today's episode, I've got Jen with me today. So Jen, how are you?
I am great. I'm happy to be here and talking about some of our favorite topics as normal. So I'm excited to dig into this.
Yeah, it's always a treat for us because we know what each other's kind of thinking, but then we start to kind of get other little things and get to kind of talk about what we're so passionate about trying to help people with. So,
yeah
okay,
absolutely.
Well, where would you like to start?
Well, I think, we have our field coach roundtable that we do. And so we're always in front of field coaches, FBCs, area managers, whatever you call them in your brands. And we hear how they're feeling sometimes. And burnout is real, overcapacity is real. So, and just what do you think are some early signs? If we've got a franchisor who's listening, what are some early signs that they could use to identify that maybe there's a problem with their coaches and maybe there's some burnout or overcapacity or dissatisfaction and things like that in their role?
Yeah, okay, so if we're talking early signs, I think some things before they actually maybe tell you that they're feeling overwhelmed or whatever that is. One of them is franchisee engagement. So, you and I, we talk a lot in previous episodes. People can go find more about the difference between like consulting and coaching. And when a field coach is at a point where they're feeling strapped for time, they're more likely to default to just answering questions and just doing the sort of the minimum and whatever's fastest and easiest, which, as we talk about all the time, can lead to disengaged franchisees because it's not as valuable to the franchisee in the longer term. It might be in the moment, but when that franchisee doesn't need that type of support, they're going to be less engaged. So they maybe show up to the coaching calls themselves less, or to those all franchise system-wide calls, conferences and things like that. And you might even start to see them get disengaged with their business because you and I have talked about, as franchisees, we needed somebody to help keep us motivated, engaged, and motivated towards our goals. So if a coach is getting burnt out and can't be hitting on those topics with their franchisees in the calls they're having, I think that engagement is a big one. That it's disguised, right? People think, oh, it's just the franchisee, something going on with the franchisee, but maybe we need to look in the mirror and look at what's going on internally, and there's something that might need to change.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I think we see that a lot when coaches are over capacity with the number of franchisees that they can actually work with and have in their portfolio or caseload or whatever terms you use. And that's what you just said is very, very indicative of that, is where we're just doing those check-ins. And we're just trying to be able to say, yeah, I touched my 50 or my 60 franchisees this month. I touched everybody.
Yeah, check mark.
Yeah, exactly. Quite often that's the measurement. And they're racing around trying to make that happen. And then, consequently though, at the same time, when that's the coaching, that's not super satisfying to a coach either. It really isn't. Is they're just checking, or they're only there for the issues and the complaints, and they're not actually helping that franchisee grow. So I think that's you hit the nail on the head when we're seeing what's happening with our franchisees, and their level of engagement can really tell us a lot about the coaches.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before too, but in case anybody hasn't heard our other episodes, I've often asked at our field support roundtable, which is all folks that support franchisees there, would they rather be doing this more kind of reactive, quick answer firefighting hotline support, or would they rather be actually coaching? And they would rather be coaching. And then I always say, well, is it like, why? Because it's more work, isn't it? And they say, well, because we want to see the impact we're making. And so, and yeah, you can at our roundtables, our field support roundtables, it's pretty obvious. It's such a great reminder that the field support role often isn't valued, and not valued enough, but it's sort of overlooked, in that it's not given the right attention it needs, and so that leads to that that burnout, right? Another thing that another way to sort of, I think, see it in advance is, I think, when the coach starts to get a little bit more quiet, and they're just sort of, they don't push back. It's like they've given up, it's like they're so burnt out. They're like, I've tried, I can't get anybody to listen to me. And so if they're not communicating with their leadership team, who they report to, and their team around them, I think that might be a sign as well.
Or reverse, they're frazzled. They're in a some people are always, when they are feeling over capacity or can't get to all the things, then they get very frazzled and disorganization happens. Maybe they're late for meetings or missing meetings, or just, you can see from their general appearance that they're not like they normally would be. And that would be, some investigation needs to happen at that point.
I'm going to mention something that I've kind of seen that I think might be important to get out on the table right now, is that I often, the people that are in the field have a different perspective than the leadership team, executives that are, working from the office. And often those people have been like more on the front line. Sometimes, I should say, not often, but sometimes the leadership team, they've lived and breathed on the front line. Sometimes they haven't. Definitely helps if they have. But sometimes there does sort of end up being this sort of us-them mentality where the leaders think, oh, they're just complaining again, because it is a tough job, but they're just complaining again about their capacity, and they just need to figure it out and step it up. And then the field teams, they're kind of sitting there thinking, well, is it just me? Am I missing something? Am I not good at my job, or what's going on here? But there's that lack of communication. So I think it's important to remember that there's two sides to every story. I think that the leadership teams are valid sometimes in that, they're not necessarily, because probably they're not necessarily giving the franchise field coaches the tools and resources and ways, which we'll get into a little bit more, how to fix this problem. But I just wanted to call it out that if in case anybody's listening and thinking, or maybe the field coaches are just complaining a lot. Well, they might be, but let's get into when it really is a problem. And these are some early signs. That's why we put those out there, like disengaged franchisees, coaches getting a little more quiet. If you can review any of the calls your coaches are doing, you probably tell right away if it's more like a question and answer period versus a strategic coaching where they're looking at KPIs and goals and how everything plays back to their bigger goals. So so is there anything we're missing here?
Yeah, and maybe this is, I don't want to solve, because I know we're going to get into solutions, but I think the communication, you said, like, have communication. Ask your coaches, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Give them the opportunity to communicate how things are going. And that's a good way to try to identify if you are a little worried about someone or they're feeling a little burnt out, because not everyone is going to come to you, because lots of people don't want to be a complainer. I don't want to be looked at like I'm not good at my job, or I can't do it, or I'm having troubles. So I think if we make it a safe space to be able to communicate, then you can really get some good insight to understand where things are at.
Yeah, because sometimes I think like they might be focused on the wrong things and they don't know it. The person in the field, like we all can, that can happen to all of us, no matter what position in the company. Sometimes just having that conversation with someone else about like kind of what you're focused on and things like the solution might be easier than you even think. Like it might just be, let's have a conversation. Oh, wait a minute, let's take that thing off your plate. It's actually not that important. I didn't realize you were this busy, or how can we help you with being more productive with your time, or it could be a quick solution. And I think people just they either don't think to ask, or they're afraid of the answer, but
they don't want to know, really.
They don't think they want to know. But it's kind of like that whole thing we talk about all the time: if you can name it, you can tame it, right? If you know. And then if it is a productivity or a performance issue, well, then you might have a bigger problem, but then at least you can figure that out too. Because if you've got franchisees that are disengaged or not profitable, not performing, and this is the problem right here, then you gotta fix this. That's why we exist. That's why AC Inc. does what we do, right?
Absolutely. And if your coaches are burnt out and drowning, are they really going to stick around?
You're right. Turnover is expensive.
Turnover costs us so much time and money.
And especially in franchising, where you're impacting the franchisees. Like I remember, we got a new, they were called area manager back then. Oh, we've got a new area manager. Okay, we have no trust built with this new person. This person has to learn the whole system. Like what if we could actually take care of the coaches, and just like we teach franchisors and coaches about holding franchisees accountable, there can be accountability and expectations. It's just, let's be clear with that and realistic with what we can expect. So I think we've probably driven some curiosity now. I think we're probably getting people curious about how we're going to solve this problem. But before we solve it, let's dig into where it comes from. Let me start with what's the first thing that comes to mind for you? Like, why do you think this happens? Why? Everybody in every role could happen to get this feeling of burnout and overwhelm, but there's specifically something that happens in franchising and specifically in the field support role. What goes through your mind when I ask that?
Well, I've definitely got a top three.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Overcapacity. And
like expecting that they're being given too much, you're saying?
A variety of things. Overcapacity. As far as actually, I'll because my second one kind of plays into it. So overcapacity, whether it's too many franchisees in your caseload, or you are being added on. Okay, you got to support these 50 franchisees, and we want you to be a prime leader in planning our conference. We want you to run these 3 committees. We want you to also do the work on the new scorecard or whatever it might be. And we want you to, do X, whatever it might be. So we're just overloading these franchisees, and it's field coaches, exactly. And it's way too much. So that's a big one. Mm-hmm. And why don't we break that one down before I move to my next one, Ange?
Okay.
What do you think? What do you tell people? Because we get asked this question all the time. How many franchisees should my coach support?
Yeah, this is like the $1 million question, right? People. It's funny how we'll be doing some kind of a webinar or presentation or whatever, and like. It's not even the topic, and they're like, by the way, because you're the field coach experts, can you just tell us the answer? Mm-hmm. So I always say, and I've recorded videos on this, and I feel strongly about this, is that there's a lot of things that it depends on. So I always say I can tell you the industry average, but I don't agree that the industry average is what you should base it on. So I'm very much going to disclaim that this is what the industry average is, about 1 to 30, but there's so many variances. So how long has the brand been around? Did or if they're all new franchisees, or if that coach happens to just have all new franchisees, then that ratio might need to be lower. If you're the type of business, we've worked with some restoration companies. Probably your ratio needs to be a bit lower. I mean, you probably then are going to have a technical coach as well as a business coach, but still, there's probably when it's a less simple brand, like if the brand is really simple, you might be able to get away with the lower ratio. And then, tenure of franchisees. What else? I know there's a couple other things.
I think travel.
Travel, yeah.
If you have, which we see a lot of, like restaurants, especially QSRs, a lot of times, coaches need to be in the locations a lot.
Yeah.
Then you've got to really scale back the number of franchisees that they're responsible for. Other things is how much operational support do you have in place outside of your coach for your franchisees?
Yeah.
That's a big one. If your coach is responsible for all the operational training and feedback and questions and coaching, they're not going to have the time they need to be doing performance-based coaching, growth coaching. So that's a big one. You are right though. Service, really simple brands. We have a brand we work with right now that it's golf simulator. There's no staff. There's nobody manning the unit at all. And the only thing that the franchisee has to do is go out and generate interest. Mm-hmm. Those franchisees can handle way more than, let's say, a restaurant or a service-based brand, a restoration company, things that are more complicated, because they are not doing a lot of the financial breakdowns and analysis and all these, the KPIs are very sales-based and stuff. So those are big ones, I think. So I like to say, if somebody asks me, I like to say if there's travel, and it's a more complicated brand, I love a 1 to 15 is my sweet spot. Others would be 1 to 20, 25. I like to cap at 30, even if you've got a really simple brand. Now, when you do that, depending on your timeline, then that might open the door for you to have your coach do a few little projects to help out. If you've really done the math, I think, the math on how much it takes to support your franchisees regularly. Also, to your point, Ange, do you have a lot of newbies? I love a brand that has a launch coach. And so they're because they're so much more operational. And then those that get past that launch point, whatever it is for your brand, then you're talking about the consistent growth coaching over here. So those play into it a lot as well.
I got a couple others that came to mind when you were saying that play into that ratio thing. Well, actually, one thing I wanted to make sure we emphasize in case people missed you saying this, because this I think is such a great solution, is having a separate operational coach, or they might not even be a coach. They might be like a trainer, or like because they're generally lower cost. They don't need as much training and coaching. And so it's a way when people say, well, are you kidding me? 1 to 15, 1 to 20. Well, if you take the operations of the business off that person's plate and they can mostly just be focused on business coaching, strategic growth coaching, then it economically can make more sense for the franchisor as well. Because I'm sure people are like, are you kidding me? The other thing I was going to say too is group coaching can play into things. So if you've got a great group coaching program going, then that can bring or the ratio can be a little higher, because I know a lot of brands will do, like if they're doing every 2-week touch points, one will be a group coaching, and then in 2 weeks the one-on-one, and then so that's, if people are hearing this and going like, this just doesn't sound realistic, there are ways to do it. We're just saying, I mean, if you really want to get this right, and I love when I get to get on calls with franchisors. I just spoke with someone the other day who he was like, we are doing this right. Our ratio was something like 1 to 15 or 25, and he's they've got about, I think, 80 something franchisees, and they're hiring their 4th FBC, like let's do this right so you don't
Yeah.
have all those casualties. Now I know people will say, well, we don't have the money. Well, then I still think, yeah, but should you be franchising? You've got to figure it out. It's not fair to those franchisees. So yeah, those are a couple other things. I
Okay.
really, oh, you had two more.
Yeah, I think the
Where it
other
comes from.
thing, so we talked about, like all the projects, being very careful to not overload, because you overload people with projects, who's going to suffer? The franchisees, because those projects have deadlines, they need the coach's attention. The franchisees are going to suffer. So you want to make sure that you're keeping within scope of anything else that you're adding on. I think also having a real clear job description, like that your coach's role is clearly baked out and you're keeping to it, because coaches quite often become the catch-all for all the departments. Get your franchisee to do this, get your franchisee to do that. They're the ones, it's always the coaches are responsible to, for marketing or some of the other departments, compliance a lot of the time, right? Really being careful of letting that happen, because your coach's role, once the people are outside of training, your coach's role is to be the accountability partner for the franchisee, to help the franchisee grow, be profitable, and be satisfied as a franchisee. Because if that happens, you're rocking, right? So I think that's what we need to do. And then my last one is, when we see this happen a lot, it's the lack of, I hate to say it out there, guys, but leadership. Is we're not, I know, but we're not setting up our coaches for success. That
Yeah.
goes with the coach's role, but the framework, managing the expectations of those coaches so they know what to do. And it's not just, well, go support your franchisees, right? They have the understanding. We've given them the training, not just on how do you be a good operator, but the training of how are you an effective coach for our franchisees. And that structure is in place. And we have somebody that is leading them, not letting them flounder, but who's leading them, developing them, helping them, and helping them also be accountable to being successful in their role and whatever metrics that we put on them as well.
I want to touch on one other, well, actually, kind of two other things. I want to just be clear that we're not saying, like, if, of course, another objection that's probably going through people's minds is, well, what about those franchisees that don't get on calls, that, are super disengaged? That's sort of a whole different episode. But, if every system is going to have, every system's going to have top, middle, and bottom. And in some systems do a better job of continuously moving out the bottom and helping them exit, so that your bottom goes up, right? But in a lot of systems, there are going to be people that you're not going to push them to be coached. If they're not going to show up and not be accountable, and you've tried certain things that we're not going to get into here today, but if you've tried to engage the franchisee, we often recommend that you create it where they have to be bought into the coaching as well. And again, that takes proper messaging. But again, when people are like, all my franchisees, like I don't know if that ratio, like if somebody has 30, but really 5 of them are disengaged, and you've kind of given the coach the pass on those, it might really be like 25 or something. I just want to point that out. There's a lot of nuances to what I said, but my point I'm trying to make is that there are franchisees out there that we don't, we want you to put your energy towards where there's opportunity, where the franchisees, understand that if, hey, we can help, like they can get out of working in their business to work on it, learn the business skills, and become better business owners, which also can play into like mindset and all that. So anyway, I'm going down a bit of a rabbit hole there, so I'll pause that. But I do want to also touch on boundaries.
Good one.
I couldn't believe how well attended the last couple of times we did roundtables where we talked about, I don't think I called it boundaries, but it's this topic of where coaches seem to be struggling to keep up and maybe on the brink of burnout. And what came up across the roundtables, including at our CEO C-suite level roundtable, is because it's franchising and because franchisees are paying royalties, people often just default to doing everything for the franchisee that the franchisee asks for, and that can lead to everybody on the team being burnt out. I heard CEOs say and COOs say, I'm guilty of this too. So you said a minute ago about the leadership. Leadership has to take a look, and this will segue us into kind of how to fix these problems. But one of them is, if the leadership team is doing it, then what do you think your field support team's going to do? They're going to see that behavior and go, I guess that's how we act around here. That's the culture. We drop everything for franchisees. To be very clear, I like to always make sure people know we're not saying do everything for franchisees. We're saying like teach a man to fish versus fish for them. Like that's what we teach at AC Inc. It's about accountability and about what this partnership actually means. And I just see that so often where everybody on the franchisor team just thinks that it's easier, I'll just do it for them. Now everybody's burnt out because they can't do what they're supposed to do. I don't know if you want to add any thoughts on that.
Yeah, we need to empower our franchisees, and we need to do that. I'm getting into solving here, but by creating
let's move into the solving.
We need to create an infrastructure that is going to support that empowerment, so that franchisees can find things themselves. Because we all know, I was a franchisee, Angela was a franchisee for a long time. My first call, I need to find that marketing asset. Business coach, where do I find that marketing asset? Oh, this, I don't know what to do here. Business coach, right? I was ringing off the hook to my business coach, to my franchise coach, for stuff I should have been doing for myself. I should have been finding things. If you've got, we Easy Assist is a good friend of AC Inc.'s, which is now AI, fetching things for us that you can just type in, I want the latest marketing asset on 2-for-1 or whatever, and up it pops. That takes so much stress off of your support team because it does it for the franchisees, and it's easy, but they're doing it for themselves. They've got to type that in, right? And there's other things, ticketing systems, having specific people who aren't your coaches that are handling some of those things, and we are managing expectations to our franchisees, that this is how you find this stuff. And I know lots of people are thinking, well, we tell them that it's in our ops manual. We don't want to look as a franchisee. I don't want, it's going to take me longer. I'm just going to ask my coach.
You're really busy wearing all the hats for real.
Yeah, all of that stuff. So make it easy. AI, fantastic. Absolutely. The other thing I wanted to say about boundaries that I hear a lot is when the coaches think that they're expected to be on call 24/7. Oh. They're answering emails and texts and things from their franchisees at 11 o'clock at night over the weekend. That's not a thing. Like that should not be a thing. We have to have clear boundaries that our coaches work from whatever time to whatever time. If, whatever it is, we've got to take into consideration time zones, whatever it is. Your coaches should not be working outside their working hours.
They're not getting paid enough.
They will resent it.
And even if they were getting paid more, it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. And the franchisees are going to expect it. And then trying to change that behavior of a franchisee is really, really hard. So you've got to manage those expectations right from the beginning. And they are just, sorry, nobody's going to answer your call or your text. Whether your guys have a different cell phone or a forwarding or whatever it is, so that you're protecting them. And now sometimes brands will say, yeah, but there could be an emergency, right? That they need somebody. Well, then figure it out. Have whether it's, okay, so-and-so's on call this weekend. Right. They're going to take the on-call, but they get 3 days off this week because they're on call. Or there's ways you can figure out those things, but we've got to get in front of that, or else it'll spiral out of control. And I have seen so many brands where it has, and they can't keep coaches because that's the expectation.
Yeah, I think it's a slippery slope. I think, like, having been in that role myself, if we've talked about this before, but you sort of feel at the beginning, when you're trying to build credibility in that role with franchisees who are saying, well, you don't understand. Well, when they might need something after hours, you're like, well, maybe this will help build
Right.
credibility. But we know that doesn't build credibility. It just builds dependency and almost kind of goes the other way because
Yeah.
it's like you're my servant and I'm going to make you work and do
Yeah.
what I need.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
we
can
like
be demanding,
yeah,
right?
and you put
People, frankly, it can be demanding.
yeah, you create the monster, and then and this is a tip for everybody, like in life in general. If you've got anybody who's pushing boundaries with you, maybe you didn't set those boundaries, and
Following
um,
through.
yeah, like well, let's talk about how we'll get into kind of how to fix this, but starting point is if somebody's listening and they have that boundary problem, and a franchisee comes to them and is like, hey, can I get the whatever? Can I get the marketing asset? Let's give them a real practical, like, Jen, what do you say to that? If you're the coach, how do you change that so that you're not just going to give them the answer?
You direct them to where they can find it.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully you've got your brand has an easy way. But even if it's okay, where you can find that? It's in the folder labeled blah 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 in the Google Drive. Or if you're
Right.
not sure, go and do a search. And but just can't you find it for me? The answer's always got to be no. Like unless you've decided, okay, this is a situation where I really do need to find it for them. I'm not saying to be a total jerk or anything, but if they get you to do it this time, then you lost your credibility of that you're gonna push back, and that now it's like I'm the easy answer, right? Like I
Yeah,
used to do for a coach.
I would add in that a couple things. I mean, you could tell them where it is, or you could say, if you couldn't find me right now, where would you go look?
I love that. Yeah.
And make them think. And
Yep.
then
Yep.
and then also, I think also if they say, well, can't you just tell me? I think it's important to add in to that. Um, I want to help you and just give you the answer because it's a lot easier for me to do that.
Mhm.
But I don't want you to be stuck and not be able to if you can't get a hold of me
Yeah, that's
and you
good.
can't get the answer, then you're going to be in trouble. So this is actually me looking out for you right now. You're right. Like, we need to be firm about it, but
Yeah.
I'm going to say no. I'm not going to just give you the answer because it's in your best interest. If I can help you figure that out without me, make you
Yes,
less
I love
dependent.
that. I love that a lot.
Yeah,
Yep,
so just throwing
absolutely.
that in there. Okay, so what are some other things we can do to fix or prevent coaches from getting burnt out? So, well, you hinted earlier at empowering. Well, you talked about empowering franchisees, but you hinted at like structuring it and frameworks. Like, talk about that a little bit.
For sure, be very clear what your coach's role is and what it is not, and that you have the infrastructure in your system, which is harder when you're young for sure, but if you're a little more established, that you have that the everyone knows it too, that you're the coach. Like if you're a marketing person and you've got an issue with the franchisee, if the process isn't that they go to the coach, that what is that process, right? Or compliance, or how are your team members supposed to deal with issues with the franchisee, and what is the coach supposed to do and what isn't the coach supposed to do, so that you can mitigate that catch-all as far as the coaches go. So having their role, being very clear also, as far as the operational side of things. When our coaches are too heavy being the operational trainer or coaching operations, then they're not able to coach for growth. So making sure that you have a way that's hopefully different than your coach to do the training piece. We see that a lot when it's all mixed in, and
Yeah,
that's not
like
really effective.
yeah, like if they're getting on a call with a franchisee and the franchisee actually needs help with something to do with operations, you kind of have to help them if there's no other system set up or other person they can reach out to or a way that they can get the answer to that. So, and it's hard to say to somebody, I know that you want to talk about that, but we're not going to talk about that, which which is a tip for people, but not worded how I said it. It'd be more like I know that this feels important to you right now. Let's just take a step back because, what we were going to talk about on this, what we were going to use our agenda and we were going to look at, what you've done to work towards the things that you said you wanted to do so you could get the goals you wanted to get. Or we can work through this operational thing right now, but I think the best use of our time is over here. But that's all coaching and training there's a company called AC Inc. I think they do that.
Yeah.
Right?
I think also
Coaches.
we're not saying, and people might make a mistake when they're listening to us, that we're saying you can't talk operations at all. That's not it. What happens though is if you are not controlling your coaching call and following, the agenda that we've set out, then it becomes, hey, what's going on? And then your franchisee's off and running with their latest issue. And it takes up the entire call. When we keep control of our agenda and we find what issue, are there any issues you want to work through on the call today? And they say, and we can train our franchisees to be brief. And they say, yeah, I really want to understand X, Y, or Z. Okay, great. And we're gonna put it in the time once we've gone through our agenda. There's time at the end to work through some of those things. When they need more time, then it's what is that next step? What is that? Do they need more training? Do they need an operational call with me? And that sometimes if you've built the buffer in with your franchisees, you can do that. It's separate to your coaching call. Now it's more on, an operations, or it's I'm going to call you on my way home tonight and let's talk this through, because it's not replacing your coaching call, which is always coaching for growth toward your action steps. Coaching your action steps toward reaching your goals, right? So it's all the way that you balance that out in your structure.
Yeah. If anybody's listening and thinking like this all sounds great on paper, we probably should be building more stories into this because we've seen this work. Like it really is about all these, like, putting these pieces in place. And it's not a ton. We'll get in a minute to like the Go Be Awesome challenge, so we can give people one or two go try this right now things. But it's not about, it doesn't necessarily mean it's this massive overhaul. Ideally, if you're having a lot of problems, you might want to look at that. But it's more doable than people think, and it is amazing how the mindset changes in franchisees when they feel empowered and they feel like the coaches is really trying to help them in the bigger way rather than just in the moment. One other thing I wanted to mention too is for the leadership teams and the coaches themselves to think about influence in that role as a field coach. That good coaching is more about influence than it is about, say, directing someone or having the answers. It's about, like, how can you use influence and persuasion, and these are of course things we talk about and we teach about in our certification program or when we do one-off workshops for brands for their field teams. But it's thinking about influence and any thoughts on that before we wrap up?
The magic combination to me is the active listening with your franchisee, the motivational questions, which is when your influence and persuasion shines. Because by those questions and the way we word things, this is how we stop as a coach. We stop telling and directing and giving the answers all the time. We're asking those questions and we're guiding them in the way that we want to guide them using our influence and persuasion so that they figure it out on their own. They come to their own determination. They determine their own action step that they're going to do, because if they do that, man, are they ever way more bought in and motivated on whatever it is they figured out or said they were going to do or whatever, than if we said to them, okay, you need to do A, B, and C. Okay, great, good, go off and do that. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not bought into that. However, it fits my idea. If I say it out loud, I'm a lot more bought in because I have ownership over it now. And so using those skills as a coach is really when it comes into that's one of the difference between coaching, the coaching and consulting.
Right.
you know.
Can you give an example of motivational questions for our audience, or like a couple examples, or active, just, or clarify active listening, just so they can definitely, or they could look it up, but definitely be able to go use it.
So just a quick active listening. We all think we're a good listener, but an active listening technique is listening, especially if they have an issue or a problem or a scenario, listening and then repeating back. Okay, so what I understand that you're saying is, and then you repeat it back, because it lets them know this person has heard me.
Or if you get it wrong, they can help you understand and make sure you got it.
Exactly. Because if we don't do that, a lot of times they're going to keep talking, because they're really trying to get you to understand and they want to over explain it to you. So, being able to stop them in an appropriate spot and do that. Motivational questioning is, and there's so many different types, and these are some of the things we teach, but there's so many different types of motivational questioning. But even as simple as something like, what do you think the downside would be if you did blah, 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 right? Like that's one, right? So that because especially if it's something that they're maybe not bought into, or like, really, what's the down? Because we're trying to get them to talk it through. Or what would happen if? That's another good one, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think you could do when this happens? Right. To your point of what you were saying earlier, when I said to you, oh, just tell them where it is. It's that asking that question so that they are being able to get out what they think, and sometimes just work it through in their head, coming up with that solution. And us asking questions is so much more effective than when we tell them.
Yeah, it creates that space. It's human nature. It's really interesting how when it comes to us ourselves, we just, we're more bought in. So, okay, well, we've talked quite a bit. I mean, it's been fun. I think we should probably wrap this up. So, okay, so the Go Be Awesome Challenge, I think we gave some pretty tangible things people could try right now already, but if either you want to repeat one of those or do you have a new one. So what the Go Be Awesome Challenge is for anybody that's listening is we challenge you to, within the next 7 days, go try this or do this. So, what do you got, Jen?
I got one last one. Everything, and I think a lot of franchisors are going to be like, yep, that's real. Everything is so much easier when we do it from day one with our franchisees. So, when you are making a change, or you identify our guys are burnt out, or they have no boundaries, or the franchisees are taking advantage of them, or taking, whatever it might be, we frame things right from the beginning with the franchisees. This is the role of your coach. This is what they do. This is what they don't do. This is when you can reach them. This is when you can't reach them. And I'm using very simple terms, but we create that right from the beginning. All expectations, as much as possible, should be right from the beginning, and then the follow through. Once they're out of that initial training and they get going, the follow through has to be there.
Yeah, that's good. I think what I'll throw in a Go Be Awesome challenge for any leadership team members who are listening is to have the courage to go ask your field support team individually, just, hey, how are you feeling, like on a scale of 1 to 10? Or, you might ask them, you might outright ask, like, how's your capacity, or whatever that question is. Just see where they're at, and you don't have to tell them you'll fix it right away, right? Like, if they do say, I'm really overwhelmed right now, okay, well, tell me more about that. Just get the information, and then let them know you're going to process it and think about it, and then maybe there will be something you can either take off their plate, or you can give them better guidance and coaching and training in their role, or there's something that you can do. But start that conversation would be something I think also is a good go do this kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one.
Okay, well, we'll wrap it up here. Let's give one more thank you to Rocket Barn for sponsoring this episode and being a good friend of AC Inc. And so if this got anybody's wheels turning, we are always open to soundboarding conversations. We're not going to high pressure sell or anything like that, because we just love having the conversations. feel free to reach out to either Jen or I. You can always find us on LinkedIn. We're pretty active there. Or go to fieldcoachexperts.com. And we also have our free roundtable. So if you're looking for a place for, peer-to-peer exchange on these things, no strings attached. We don't require any commitment, just cameras on. That's the only rule. If you want to get on that invite and you are a franchisor or on a franchisor team, reach out to me and we'll get you set up. So that's it for today, and go be awesome.